taking a little bit the perspective, well, you are maybe someone who's responsible for a process or is working with a particular process, and you want to analyze your own process. And here process mining provides many opportunities because you don't have to get an external consultant team or bring up a big IT project. If you can get your hands on some data, you can actually analyze your own process independently, and that's empowering quite a bit compared to these other scenarios that were applicable before. And so today's practice talk is a little bit in that use case. And I would like to welcome Gary Bonneau, who's a senior manager for product operations at Cox Business, which is the business side of Cox Communications. Hi, Gary.
Hi, Anne.
Well, we are very happy to have you here, Gary, to hear you share your experience from your process mining analysis so far. And I'll hand you over the floor. So please start your presentation now.
Thanks, Anne. I appreciate that. Hello, everybody. As Anne mentioned, my name is Gary Bonneau. I've been with Cox Communications for about 18 years now. Started in the early days as an application developer, and then crossed over to the product side of the house, if you will, starting really on the residential side with residential customers. For the last 8 years or so, I've been on the Cox Business side, as Anne mentioned, where we have more complex products than on the residential side, so it's been very interesting from that perspective. And I think with my background of applications and transactions, when I discovered process mining a few years ago, it was a natural fit. So one of the things I've been working on is, for the last couple of years, is just trying to get different groups in Cox aware of process mining, and seeing how we can leverage that in other areas, starting really with some of the traditional process teams or analytic teams. But in the last couple of years, from a product perspective, if we can get a hold of the data, then can our product folks, our product managers who own the actual responsibility of the products for a life cycle perspective and make sure they're working as advertised, can they do their own sort of analysis if we had something behind the scenes? So with working with John Schuler, who's a data guru, life cycle expert on our Cox Business side, together he and I were able to put together several data sets, data sources together to create somewhat of an end-to-end view, and that's really what we're going to kind of talk about today. So from a business perspective, we look at things from a customer side, right? So one of the things we always kind of look at is what is the end-to-end experience for a customer? Customer journey mapping, customer journey is a very common thing to look at. This view of learn, buy, get, use, pay, support really is referred to as LB-GUPS, first, I think, introduced by AT&T many years ago. But it is a way that we view a lens from the customer perspective. So how do the customers learn about us? How do they buy our products and services? How do they get it? And this is really the fulfillment side that I spend a lot of time with. How do they use our products? And how do we pay for it? And how do we offer support for them? So the gray boxes underneath actually represent different data sources that are in the ecosystem that we're put together as far as trying to see from transactionally, how do things look from a process perspective. The service work order is kind of key. It contains what services the customers might order or want. There's a workflow system, and that is actually drives some of the more discrete or lower level tasks to make sure that we can turn up a service. And one of the responsibilities I have is really around the self-install perspective. So we actually send kits or equipment to customers so they can do it themselves. So we have supply chain data, and they're the ones that kind of ship it out. We also notify the customers when things do happen, like we shipped it or any sort of notifications around that. So those are a couple other data sources we have. We also have a ticketing system, so if there's an issue that comes up, we have a ticketing system that could route to different teams that would be related to the original work order or account number possibly. And then the last data source that we've kind of pulled together is the IVR. So as a customer calls in, why are they calling in, and how can we support them from a data perspective? So of these 6 different systems, this is kind of where we started from to get an end-to-end view of this. So from here, as kind of Rudy even mentioned before, is like, where do we begin? So we have 6 disparate systems, and John and I took quite a bit of time to look into this and trying to figure out what are the keys within each data system that are relevant and exist in multiple systems. So if you look at the bottom left, the service work order has a work order key, which is very unique to a service, and a work order key, a work order number can be a one-to-many relationship to a customer, and also the products and services that are associated are also on that work order. But you can see that not all those keys exist in every system. So trying to identify what the primary key might be for some of these, we noticed that we'd have to do some work behind the scenes. So when we do the extraction, we actually seed some of these different data sources. So they kind of end up looking like this, where we've added keys to make things are common. So when you look at some of the process mining, you have to kind of think through is, how do I want to view the processes? Do I want to view it from just a unique work order perspective, or do we want to look at it from a customer perspective? So you have to have these different keys in order to make sure that when you combine all these into one output, you can actually work with it, and you can go back and forth, and everything does have the linkage that you need to work forward. The other thing we added into this was, from a product perspective, we care about which products each product manager might be interested in. So making sure that the products and service codes that are really at the work order level are available in every data source. So again, this was another seeding opportunity that we put together that said, if we wanted to filter in any product, we would not lose a data source because we had the relevant keys to that. So this really set the stage to what we really wanted to do to bring all these things together. And then the next step is creating the composite records as a result of this. So on the right-hand side, you can see this is just some mocked up data, but some of the key columns that we're looking at is case ID. We can either use the work order number for a case ID, or we can use the customer key as that. We also have a view of the source, where the data came from, which is important from a high-level view perspective. And we can also filter and actually look at just one source by itself, because we have this ability to do that. And then we also have, the product relationships with every record as well, so we know what was happening with every work order. There are many more fields, but from an example perspective, these are the ones that will probably drive most of the filtering or the views that we're going to try to drill into. And then from an activity perspective, we start out with the highest level. I think that just kind of makes sense, that start with the highest level, and then we can drill down to more task level here in a second. So this is the first view that we created as a result of these 6 different sources. Very common flow that you guys might be aware of, but this is really the first time, at least in Cox, that we have actually put together multiple data sources in a single view. So that was very unique from this. And people that recognize these systems, they get a sense that it is something different that they have ever seen before, that a single customer view can be seen across, in this case, 6 different data sources. And this is really where I think this is more of a leadership view, a big picture. This is how we are going to drill down into and see what the customer experience is going to look like. We're not done. There are other systems that we're going to add to it. Salesforce is a front-end sales tool that is just coming online in some different respects. So we'll be adding that to it. NPS is Net Promoter Score. So these are surveys that are sent to customers post-installation, if you will, just to get a sense of how the service is working for them. We're going to bring that in too as well. Care solutions. So we have some systems behind the scenes that have really good transactional view of how and if a customer calls in, what do we do to resolve any issues for that customer, and bring in those things as well. And then we have a new construction workflow that kind of spins off from the other workflow that's new. So we're going to bring those in. So that'll bring it up to 10 different sources that we will have our view across from a customer perspective. So very excited about that. So that's the previous one was more of the high end. Now to get to the working level, there's more discrete tasks within every source. So we expose that in this column just to get a sense that this is really where a lot of the work and insights come from. And that way, once we drill down into that side of it, and then drive a new process map, you can see how more complex. And this is still a very high level, but it's not the spaghetti that you might see just because we put some filters in. But it also gives us some ideas of some early things that we might want to pay attention to. One of the things that we wanted to kind of drill into is some of the customer notifications that we sent out to customers based on certain triggers. And on the left side, those boxes that are in red, those are specific to the customer notifications, and we're going to drill down into those here in a second. On the right side, one of the things that I do occasionally that helps, especially if you're demoing it with other customer or other product folks, is I combine the activity of the task and the source so they know where the source is from. Not everybody knows the task level names, but if you include the source name, they can kind of see where it came from, and as a part of that, kind of makes it a little bit easier to follow as you go through. So that's been helpful. So here's more of a discrete example, and this is something we really had to dig into. So in the process flow, you can see that what we expect in the green, the 1, 2, 3 numbers, that is how we really expect this flow to work. Where you can see the star, we never expect that a customer notification of order process would go to order complete without having an order shipped between it. So that tells us that maybe the order didn't get shipped out, or for some reason that notification never happened. And this is one of the first things that we kind of saw that was very obvious, and we didn't even need to drill into too much. So it was very interesting that once we found this, we went to our boundary partners who own these systems and said, hey, there seems to be an issue here. We are seeing a bunch going straight to order complete where there's no ship. And having the conversations with them, they thought they understood where the problem might be. But because of the filtering that we did behind the scenes, we have different markets within Cox Communications. So one of the things I did behind the scenes was, is this market specific or is this, across the board? And I could tell behind the scenes that it was actually isolated to certain markets. So to me, that was clearly somewhat of a configuration issue, if you will. And they came back and said, hey, we fixed this, you're good to go. And we said, all right, let's look at some more data. And it didn't change. So they took what we said and they interpreted it, if you will, what they thought the problem was. And so in the second round, I sent this picture to them. And the picture told exactly what the problem was. And when they finally realized what we were truly saying, it turned out to be a configuration issue, just like we thought it was. So the picture, the visualization of the flow, which they truly never see anyways, was so powerful that it just kind of cut to the chase of what the problem was. It makes it agnostic. It's not pointing fingers at somebody's system. They're just saying, hey, this is what we're seeing in the data. What can you tell us? And we knew it was clearly wrong. So after the second pass, they said they fixed it, and we're like, all right, let's take a look at it again. And obviously the 1, 2, 3 happens, and there is no path to go from order process to order complete directly. So we saw that for part 1. And you can see some of the rework, if you will, or the loops that go back into themselves, which was new to me. I thought we were actually doing some duplication, if you will, of events. So I thought, hey, we discovered something else here. But actually working with the team, that is actually a correct path if we look at some other variables to it, because we actually send out 2 messages, one to an email system and one to a web system, so they can check it online. So 2 to 1 was correct, which was a learning for me. So on both sides, you'll discover things that maybe you didn't know how things work behind the scenes, and also you can kind of help out the systems on the other side. Another example that we ran into recently was, and it's very similar, so this represents 2 different systems. One is our supply chain system, and we added a couple of delivery notifications to the customer notification suite, if you will. So in this flow, where you see the red cross there is delivery going straight to order complete without the order confirmation or the delivery confirmation going out, which again is problematic. So it was, now that we had worked with these other system owners and stuff like that, showing the same sort of view, they were able to kind of cut to the chase going, yep, we see the problem, and we can quickly find things that would probably live in this system if we didn't look behind the scenes. And because it's kind of agnostic, that they're able to work with this and find out what the issue was. So very easy to kind of work through a smaller set of tasks to give to boundary partners or other system owners. So they fixed that for us as well. One of the other things that we find very useful is researching customer level sequences, if you will, right? So the overall process looks good, but how does it look for a particular customer, a particular work order? And did we find a certain tasks that we expected to find? Is it firing or is it actuating where we thought it was? The search function is really useful in that. So this is an example of a particular EWP, which is an engineering work package that we were wondering if it was actually still being used. And it was so easy within the data set to kind of pull this down. I had some market level product managers that I work with in the field who have reached back out and said, hey, we had a customer that had a problem with the process. Can you take a look at it? Well, normally you would have to look at the multiple data systems separately to kind of figure out what it is. And it was very easy because I had this already put together. I asked them for the account number, put it in the account number, and said, here's exactly what happened to the customer in every step of the way in seconds, because we had already built this behind the scenes. So this is really the advantage that we see, that while it worked for my particular use case on the fulfillment side, any product folks can look at it within their own product domain and see how things are working end to end. And it's a visibility that we've never had before. So it's easy to impress the local or your market boundary partners to say, hey, we can tell you exactly what happened across multiple systems. So that was very useful. The other thing that we're looking at is we begin to use some bots within certain systems to automate tasks. So it's nice that within these systems, these bots are actually identified. So we can see how successful some of the automation bots in performing their task, and how much of the tasks and the frequency are they actually helping solve for. It is kind of challenging to make a business case for bots, but I think within the process mining and within Disco, we can say, hey, it's working, and it's working well or not. And guess what? There might be some other candidates for bots that might make sense. And here's the quantity, the frequency, and the time, and the duration that these tasks actually take, and that kind of gives you some guidance to say, all right, does it make sense to build a bot to do something else? They typically don't have a view into this. They know how many bots, kind of do stuff, but relative to the big picture, this was a view that they never had before. So whether it makes sense to put a bot in and automate certain tasks is easily seen through the process mining lens as well. Next step. So one of the things that we keep saying, is how can we move this program forward? So we've made some different progress, but given demos to other product teams and showing them how quickly they can gain insights within their own product, because we've already put the pieces together behind the scenes. It is those who own their own products, once they see it in a visual format, they're almost immediately going, it either is working as I thought, or they'll actually just say, why is it doing something XYZ? And they can take that and then they can go work the problem far quicker than trying to stand up a traditional, well, how's my product working, where you might have interviews, you might have other people trying to figure out, how do they think it works? We can tell them exactly how it's working today transactionally and see opportunities to fix things or make them better if we like. One of the other things is system owners. So system owners really like to see what their own transactions might do. We have the opportunity to work with a couple of different other systems. The customer notification was an example. There was another new system that we're going to bring in, and working with their developers, with their application owners, we asked for, hey, just give us a dump from your log files or the database files of all the tasks. And we were able to show them exactly how their process works as they thought they designed it, and it worked well. But the big takeaway was this was an automation that programmatically helps some of our care agents do things quicker and more reliably. And most of these tasks were sub-second to maybe second in duration, where normally that would be an agent who is mainly looking at different things themselves, trying to figure out what might be happening or not. So it really proved out that their value for that system was significant. This also happens to be one of the other new systems that we're going to bring into. So looking at it, we kind of found out very quickly how we can incorporate it into the ecosystem and what we have. Keeping leadership updated is very key as well, because this is new and a new way to look at things. But once leadership can see, especially at a high level, of what you can do with it, what benefits and how it improves the customer experience, carries a lot of weight, because they're used to some of the traditional manner of trying to put together a team, look at stuff behind the scenes, and that might take weeks to months. But because we built it as we have, and they don't have to go through that, on their own, and we can provide insights to multiple product teams, is very powerful and kind of gets you backing within leadership, and it starts to grow from itself. And one of the most fun things that we've seen is, while we advocated it with other teams, having other teams advocate themselves for process mining because of what they've seen, and you don't have to campaign as hard, if you will, is very, very satisfying, I guess, because seeing what other people see the value in it itself, and you don't have to go through and try to sell it, if you will, for people who aren't quite aware of what's going on. So seeing other teams become advocates for you is very, very satisfying, and it helps grow the program, if you will, as well. So I think that's my last slide. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks so much, Gary, for sharing your experience. It's really, really good to see also these concrete examples, like what type of analysis you could do. And it makes it very tangible, that perspective, like you are responsible for these processes. And so how exactly does process mining fit into that, and what kind of value does it provide? And especially the very first example that you gave, I think that was so interesting where you mentioned that the boundary partners were actually responsible, right? And you were talking with them and telling them, already suspecting that there was a configuration error in there. So that was a good reminder, is that it's not only your own company where your processes are running, but that very often organizations are working together with external parties, like these partners, right, who are carrying out a part of the process. We have actually seen one example I'm thinking of right now at an electronics manufacturer in Germany. They had the situation that they were looking at their customer satisfaction or some kind of refund process, I think, and but the customer satisfaction was really related to them as the manufacturer, but they were relying on all of these partners in the ecosystem, right? And that's a little bit, I can imagine, in your space also is really applicable, that you have all these different partners you work with. So it's also a communication means.
Very much so. It helped a lot because there was always the notion, and probably people have seen it, having business people talk to technology or IT folks, there's always something lost in the translation. As much as I used to be one, and I think I can cross that over, showing them the visualization, the picture, kind of just cuts through all of it, which is really nice.
Yeah. So that became really, really clear. Thanks very much for that. For the people who are watching right now, so in the camp community on Slack, you can add your questions for Gary. If you want to know more things, we will pick it up, and he will also look at them later. In the meantime, I will also I'll have a few questions. Let me see where to start. So, for example, to really get a sense of how process mining fits into the day-to-day work of a process manager or a product manager like yourself. I think you gave this example with talking with these boundary partners. You also had this example where other partners or other departments were calling you to look up particular accounts, like, right, a customer who was having a problem. Is this like a large part of the work, kind of looking at problematic cases and trying to resolve them? Yeah,
it is definitely probably 20-30% of it, and it makes it usable data. It's not like you build it once and it paints a nice picture and then you might move on. We can use it as a source to figure out what's happening behind the scenes, where typically most people might only have access to one or two of the applications and the data behind it. We can do it in one shot across multiple applications and show them a view that they'd never known before. And we learn from it every time. So it's very, even the example I showed about the engineering work package, that was a new view, and it kind of had multiple effects to us. And it also turns out we're adding another source of data because it's kind of split off into two systems. Going, all right, we didn't think we needed to do that as quickly, but now we have, since they've rolled out a separate system for some of the construction work, we need to tie into that as well.
Yeah. And you mentioned all these systems that you had to combine, and that you also got some help there from a colleague. So how long do you think did it take you to put these 10 systems? I think you are now, right, at having combined 10 systems?
So we're at 6, adding 4 more. So The nice thing is, you can start with one as you add these together and start getting insights. You don't have to wait till all 6 are put together, but the more you put together, the more, a different view that you have. It took John and I probably maybe 6 weeks, but we were in low level, going field by field, trying to figure out what everything looked like, and working with some other application folks behind the scenes. But once we have it, now it's built, it's reusable. We can slice and dice this for any particular product, and we have been. So John's doing work separately with other teams, going, all right, for product X or product Y, we can show that to you and turn around, and now they have something tangible they can work with.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point that you're making. You have put this work in, but it's actually usable in other areas and for other products, not the ones that you're responsible for, but even in other places, because the infrastructure is the same there, right?
Right. You have common systems, just a different view of a specific product.
Yeah. And that's a little bit like what we see in other places too. It's like, of course, when you're really starting out with process mining for the first time, is that you have to really account for enough time to get the data right. And often people underestimate it, and it might take longer than they think. But it is, you can think of it as an investment. It's not like for every analysis you have to do that, but it's, you do it once, and then once you have the data ready, you can keep analyzing and then...
Right.
Okay, so... Let me see. So, for example, from the community, maybe just a quick feedback. Franz says it's a great presentation and really shows the holistic power of process mining for an entire business, which is exactly what you just said. Maybe also one other aspect I was curious about is you mentioned towards the end the automation use cases where you were looking at how some of the bots were doing. What exactly? How do you think process mining can help in these kind of automation initiatives that organizations are taking up today?
Yeah, as you look at the different tasks, because of both the frequency and the duration, you can see where time is being spent holistically. And if you look at it for total duration, which is something I typically don't look at, I typically at the working level try to stay with like a mean duration. But if the volume of work is, aggregated up to total duration, where you see there's weeks and months worth of work based on volume, maybe that's a candidate for a bot that I don't think I would have thought it would have been without that view. So I think it definitely shows some of the opportunities from what people are doing, and then those bots that are existing, are they working? How much workload are they taking off of other areas of the business? And seeing that together is very powerful. I've showed it to some other teams that are responsible for the bots, and they're very intrigued by what we can show them as far as one, what value are they currently bringing to the business, and is it matching what they thought, as well as here's some other candidates that might fit in, or maybe not, but at least something for them to start with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I can imagine. And then, so that's like you said, you can look at the potential based on the actual data, and also take the volume into account, right? That's maybe also a reminder a little bit for people who are analyzing their performance in process mining. It's a good idea not just to look at the average time, because if something took very long but it was just performed once or twice, maybe that wouldn't make a big impact if you automate that. But it's really good to look at the combination of volume and time in these use cases. So, for example, using the total duration in Disco combined with either the medium or the mean gives you a nice view for this kind of cumulative bottleneck analysis to see where you can gain most, perhaps to find more candidates.
There's always opportunity out there.
Yeah. So as a process owner using process mining, what would you advise people who are starting out and are in the same position? Any tips to close the session here today?
Probably two. Just start, because I think that's what I did years ago. I just started looking at one, and once you got comfortable, then you can kind of dig into it more. But most IT shops, there's going to be a data warehouse somewhere that has all this data, and just finding who the application owner is and where their data goes, and then you can probably all end up in the same spot. It's in some data warehouse somewhere, and then you can start piecing it apart. So I was fortunate that John has been a great partner to help me kind of dig into it, and he had access to everything more than I had. So if you find a data guru who knows all the warehouse data, and then you start with one system and then just start building from there, I think you'll get there. Yeah,
exactly. And also making them enthusiastic about the technique can really help to get them on board, right? And
exactly
get their support in making these multiple iterations that you surely need. It's probably not going to be right the first time, so
Yep, John and I did a lot of work together.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, that's really great that you got him and you got this together. So so nicely for all these different systems. I just see that there's I think one more question from the community that we can also pick up before we close. So first of all, Rudy is asking, can you tell a little bit more about the IVR analysis?
Yeah, IVR is inbound call application. So if somebody calls in, it has the ability to route calls based on certain rule sets behind the scenes. So whether it's, they usually take a look at, who's calling in, do we know their phone number, and then do we know who their account is, so we can kind of route them automatically to the right spot. Trying to figure out how often customers are calling into for whether it's a billing issue, a support issue, or that they actually want to maybe change their service, helps product owners see how the customer is doing it. So it's really about customer touch points, and that's a big one for an inbound call to say a customer is reaching out to us for something. Could we have avoided that call? How did the call go? Are there repeat calls? Are they calling in for the same thing for 3 days in a row? We're not solving their problem. It all starts as one of the data sources there.
Yeah. Okay. These are great examples. Thank you very much. So Carlos is also saying that it was really nice to see the impact that the showing the processes has had to other people also in the business and to the whole organization. And he makes that point is that it's particularly nice that you can talk about the actual problems and people don't feel hurt or maybe misunderstand or are talking about opinions. So that's something that we see in other places too, is that it really kind of makes what you're talking about objective and referenceable, right? Something you can look at. So that's exactly, I think, what became very clear very nicely in your talk.
Yeah, I mean, the data tells the story, the transactions tell the story. It's not personal, it's just data. Let's just fix it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's maybe the perfect place to end for this practice talk session. Thanks again, Gary, for sharing your experience with the community. So what we will do now is we will go back into a brief break, and we will be live again 1:15. So if you come back in roughly half an hour, we will be back with Gary and also Carmen and Javier to further talk about how to make the most of your own data. So see you then. Thanks.